Great Depression was a time of worldwide hardship. Millions were left unemployed and families suffered. But before we get to that, let's cover a bit of background. The Roaring Twenties, a time of economic prosperity, of women finding their voice through their own sexuality and rebellion. The explosion of jazz music and other arts during the Harlem Renaissance. An elegant time with a large middle class, a high birth rate, an era that we still today use to illustrate the American dream. The Roaring Twenties built the country up towards the sky, right up until 1929 and the start of the Great Depression. On October 24th of 1929, Black Thursday, the market slumped 11%, causing panic in stockholders who hadn't seen the market fall in 9 years and couldn't afford any more losses. Unfortunately, this was just the beginning. The following Monday and Tuesday, they saw drops of 13% and 12% respectively. More than 9,000 banks closed, causing millions to lose their savings and making credit virtually non-existent. This destroyed the credit-built economy and threw the Western world into the Great Depression. This brings us back to the Great Depression's effect on the American family. Once middle-class families saw their income plummet as men everywhere were laid off or hit by huge pay cuts. The unemployment rate was at 9.4%, and in the mid-30s it peaked at just under 25%. That's 1 in every 4 wage earners not having a job. Fathers quickly found themselves in soup lines instead of providing for their families. Many families were torn apart by this transition, as fathers couldn't handle the switch from being the breadwinner to having less status and respect among their family. In 1940, 1.5 million men reportedly left their families behind. While men lost jobs or had severe wage cuts, women continued to be housewives and often found their part in the household growing. Women often went against their historic roles of not working because the income was needed. During the Great Depression, women made up 25% of the workforce. Women took on more responsibility and made their earnings go as far as possible. Often this meant families made their own clothes, grew their own food, and generally made efforts to spend less. Children began to drop out of school at higher rates, as many were required to get jobs in order to make ends meet. Now we'll hear from the heads of a family that has been affected by the Depression. After the stock market crashed in 1929, I received a substantial pay cut. For the first time, I had trouble supporting my family.
The kids have had to drop out of school and find jobs. I, of course, am working too.
After the stock market crashed in 1929, I received a substantial pay cut. For the first time, I had trouble supporting my family.
We've been doing everything we can to save money.
We planted a garden in our backyard and we've made our own clothes. I feel bad that my wife and children have to help me provide for ourselves. I've had to leave for days on end to look for a job.
With my husband gone, my responsibilities to the family have increased.
Overall, times are hard. President Hoover needs to take action. It wasn't until the very end of the 1930s that World War II's outbreak pulled the United States out of the Great Depression. Supporting the Allies' efforts against Germany provided the initial boost, and then when the U.S. itself entered the war, the home front effort started an economic boom that would stay through the next 2 decades.
Yes, you.
The war had a big impact on families as well. Men were sent off to war, once again changing the roles at home.
What did I do?
Women filled in the factory jobs that their husbands had left behind, and began once again creating a new identity for themselves. Some even began to hold military positions.
How true were the friends who were near me to cheer
The rest of the family was affected by things like wartime rations and the press to buy
who would
bonds.
hurt me, desert me when I needed you.
The Great Depression had a large effect on the American family. It changed roles among family members, and mainly, it along with the following war years, meant sacrifice. Fortunately, many of the families that went into poverty during this era came out middle class on the other side.
Yes, The Germans are driving me crazy. I thought I had brains, but they've shattered my plans. They've built up a front against me, it's quite amazing. Clouding the skies with their